today's webinar is Accelerating Beyond COVID, India, Artificial Intelligence and Acquisition. Now, why in such a sequence of order and how this idea popped up? As we are all slave of technology right now, we realize that without technology, we cannot work. Now that is day-to-day work. Now the situation is that how to sustain, how to keep ourselves afloat and keep this challenge head on, that we can find new ways to sustain. We start today with India, that where India stands, what Indian government can do, and what are the expectations of the business and the entrepreneurs are from India and the Indian heads. Coming down to business, what are the technologies we should equip ourselves to stay ahead of the game, and whether the market is ripe for acquisitions. I'm introducing Mr. Rajesh Jain, who is a technology entrepreneur, and there was one more introduction of his, which is why he is a guest speaker. He's a political and prosperity entrepreneur. So when he failed in his various ventures, he learned to rise. And over the years, when he has been there and done that, he found his way and looked upon our Indian economy. Because once upon a time, he decided to return to India after being his stint in US, that whatever he wants to do it in India and with India. He has been a self-learner economist, and he has started many business, exited. He advises that there should be time when you should know how to and when to exit. And now he is looking at a lot of acquisitions as well. So over to Mr. Rajesh Jain, and I will introduce also another panelist, Mr. Muthu Pandi from our team. We call ourselves techno lawyers, and artificial intelligence is something which we admit that this is the way forward. And if any technical questions, though this is not a very technical oriented session, if there is any technical question, you can write chat. If we can respond to you summarily, we will respond. Otherwise, if there is an interest, we will do and conduct a subsequent webinar where we can get into the core technology of artificial intelligence. Yes, welcome Mr. Rajesh Jain. The forum is open to you now.
Hello everyone, thanks a lot Mahua for the introduction. And just a reminder that if you have any questions, please leave it in the chat window, in the Q&A window, and we'll take those up at the end. So my presentation is in 3 parts. I do not have any slides, so I'll just be talking through. The first part is really about the challenges that we face in India during these difficult times. I'll look at the economic side and what I think we need to do going forward, some very different ideas. The second part will be around the business opportunities that AI brings in. And the third part is that as a leader, I think if there are 2 takeaways for you on Monday morning, of course, every day is right now a Sunday for many of us, what would they be? So let's start with the India component. I think what we are facing today is a sort of fork in the road moment. It's almost like what we faced in 1947, where we had to make a choice on, of course, the political future, but also the economic future. We are coming out, the British had left the country. Which path does India take next? And my belief is that after 70 plus years, I think the evidence is quite clear that the economic path that we took was not the right one. We have failed as a country to create prosperity for our people. At about $2,000 per capita income, India is not one of the richest countries. Other countries have gone much further ahead of India. In that context, this is another such moment. I think all previous assumptions on the economic side, etc., are all out of the window. We are seeing probably a once in a 100-year event. I think no company could have planned for, in many cases, 0 revenues State governments are seeing very limited money flow in. We saw the numbers come out for the petrol sales, diesel sales. It's down almost 50-60%. In this scenario, what can be done next? That's the fork in the road that we are talking about. And there are two paths that can be taken. The first path is where we could see a lot more government. So this will involve government basically taking care of needs of from food to education to healthcare. Every need effectively gets taken care of by the government, because people are losing incomes, people are likely to lose jobs. US has already lost about 20 plus million jobs. We may see some of that already happening in India. Migrant labor has been displaced. So one path is really where the government takes a substantially large role in the economy. We could see nationalization of industries, for example, airlines, travel, hotels, etc., who are not likely to see much revenue going forward. It's a very dangerous path, because once government's role in an economy grows, it's very difficult then for governments to then step back. And that is a role which I think we have somewhat seen before in the 50s, 60s, 70s. It's not a path that probably the country should go down on. We did some unraveling of that in 1991 and the subsequent reforms during various governments after that, especially the Vajpayee government. We've seen some part of this in the first term of the Modi government also, but a lot more needs to get done. So there's a second path wherein we leave the people free to choose their own destiny. I know this may sound very counterintuitive at this stage when we are facing many challenges, but I think if there is one path, if we study the countries which have achieved prosperity, there is a clear path to those countries, and that is a path of limited government, economic freedom, rule of law, free trade, and property rights. And that is the environment that we need to create in India now. It would have been very difficult for any government to do this as a sequence of reforms, but it's like a fresh start in India. It's the 1947 moment that we are facing right now. And if we can make this happen, I think we can lay the foundation for a prosperous country going forward, because Indians are no different from Americans or Chinese or Germans. I mean, the same Indians who struggle in India do incredibly well when they go abroad, because the rules are different. And that's what we need to change. The rules are different, the incentives are different. So if we can make that change, I think we can put India on an irreversible path to prosperity. So what India really needs is a Nai Disha. I'd worked on this for a couple of years going back. The website is still active. If anyone is interested, Nai Disha, NAYIDISHA.com. And the key idea here is about two key things. India is actually a very rich country. We had estimated that the public wealth of India is about $20 trillion. Trillion. Now, this wealth is actually under the control of the government. It's locked up in minerals. It's locked up in PSUs, the public sector undertakings, and it's locked up in land, which is controlled by the government. This is wealth that actually belongs to the people of the country. On a per family basis, this comes to roughly 50 lakh rupees per Indian family for every one of the 26 crore families. If we can start monetizing the public assets and putting this money back in the hands of the people, and there is no better moment to start than today, we can actually put India on an irreversible path to prosperity. Many of the other measures, printing money, etc., which are being discussed, are going to cause a lot of economic distress actually going forward. I mean, as someone put it, today's fiscal deficits are tomorrow's taxes. We may have impact on the inflation, on the currency, creates a lot of uncertainty on business going forward. And that is where I think we need to take a dramatically different approach. Treat it as a freedom moment in India. 1947, we got political freedom. In 2020, can we get economic freedom, which has been pretty much denied to a lot of businesses and individuals in the country. And I think if we can do that, we will see a new India emerge, a stronger India emerge, in the next few years. So that's the fork in the road. Those are the two futures that are there. Mahua, so this is the first part of it. Any questions, any thoughts? I think you're on mute.
So what could be the possible solutions or paths which you would like the government to take? We are all looking up to the government. So what are the things which you think we should expect from the government?
Okay, I think very good point to discuss. I think there's an expectation of a package. While the RBI and the government have announced some measures, I think there's a lot of expectation that much more needs to get done. We have been pretty much, a lot of people of us are there 4 weeks into the lockdown. And we are going to see many businesses challenged. Cash flows are very difficult to come by for a lot of businesses. So there are significant challenges in the in the near term that are there. I think going forward, and these are very, very different ideas from probably what you are hearing about. I think what India needs are basically incomes and jobs. And the starting point can be having 1 lakh rupees or 10,000 rupees per family given by the government to every family in the country. It does not matter whether it is rich or poor, because you really can't do the differentiation right now. You'd spend a lot more money trying to figure out if a family is below poverty line or above poverty line. In that sense, it's like the universal basic income idea, but with one very, very big difference. This is money which is not coming from printing, RBI printing out lots of money, which we have tried in the past with very bad consequences. This money has to come from public asset monetization. Now, while the public asset monetization part will take time, I think what the Indian government could do is borrow $2 trillion from global markets. Sovereign borrowing, there's a lot of money sitting globally earning negative interest. About a year ago, it was something like $17 trillion sitting in the world. Okay. This money can be paid back in a few years with the asset monetization program that is run. The first step would be returning 1 lakh of rupees to every family, which is their own wealth, by the way. It's not something which they don't deserve. It's their wealth. That would cost $350 billion a year. Do it for 3 years. Okay, you're remonetizing the economy at a massive scale. And the second point is use a $2 trillion to embark on a massive public infrastructure build out. I mean, a lot of stuff needs to be built out in the country: roads, airports, new cities, and so on. And that's how we're going to create jobs. We're going to put money into people's hands. When they start spending it, it'll create the whole chain of job creation and so on.
So coming back to AI, because the topic is artificial intelligence. So because that was the the mindset of the people, that let's first try to find out where the cash flow is coming from. Okay, whether the liquidity is drying up or the government is doing something about the liquidity, then only they can think of upscaling their present infrastructure and artificial intelligence or acquisition. That's why we took it up, that what are the expectations during this time. So now coming to artificial intelligence, we would like to share just a slide and demystify for those who are not from a technical background or just have heard of artificial intelligence in just as an example, like when you are writing on your chat, then there is an autocorrect. Then that is artificial intelligence, but how it's happening, from where it starts. So it starts from the collection of user data, and there is a pattern. So the machine learns, machine collects that data and machine learns from that entire data. And then the learning goes to a stage where you understand the behavioral pattern. And when that behavioral pattern then you become smart. And that is the intelligence we are set in, and that is where the whole thing works. So to begin with, the data collection has to be there and the data learning has to be there. Now this is just for, take it off. So this is just for what is artificial intelligence in a layman language. Now, Mr. Jan has been running a successful business, Netcore Solutions, which is very much, giving products like marketing digitizations and based on all artificial intelligence. We would like to know where this technology now needed, and I believe that this is needed at all sectors, irrespective of what sectors you are in, whether you are in FMCG, you are in retail in the end of the pyramid, or you are in a health sector, or you are in a manufacturing sector. So that's how the thought process came to me, that in order to be more efficient and stay above the game and to have that competitive edge, artificial intelligence is required. Can you please throw a light on that?
I think very good introduction, Maua. I think the starting point for AI is basically, as Maua explained so well, is data. And that is perhaps the biggest transformation that we have seen in the last probably 10, 15, 20 years. It started with, of course, the world of computers. When the computers got connected, we had the internet. The devices then became smaller and much more powerful. Today, smartphones are as good as computers probably of 20, 25 years ago. And now all of these devices really are creating a massive data trail. Actions that we are doing as consumers, across our supply chains, across pretty much every aspect of business, there is massive data being generated. So the first point, and I'll reinforce that in the coming minutes, is the collection of data. Because you cannot learn, you cannot predict what's going to come if you do not have the data. What does AI really help businesses to do? At a simple level, it helps them recognize patterns and therefore make predictions on the future. A simple example, and we are very familiar with this, is if you look at Netflix. We watch Netflix, or you look at the Amazon recommendations that are there. Now, what are they doing? They are looking at individual patterns which are there. They're collecting data from what programs we are watching. They are matching it with other people like us. So in a way, it's collaborative filtering. Okay, they are looking at, okay, if Rajesh watched a certain movie, other people, or a set of movies or a set of web series, what did other people like Rajesh do? And therefore make this prediction that what am I going to like next? Now, this is where the large data that's generated really makes a big difference. We are seeing phones now with AI. So I think what's very critical is that from a business perspective, if businesses are now going to become much more optimized, much more efficient at what they are doing, and we all will have to do that. As a friend of mine put it, he said FY21 is going to be about 9 months of revenue and 12 months of expenses. Okay, so we have to be incredibly efficient on what we are going to spend on going forward, how we're going to manage cash flows. I think AI can be a big differentiator in every business. And the key point really here is, how do you collect data at every touch point that is there with your customers, with your partners, resellers, etc. Then will come the second part, which is where the the technology starts coming into play. Once you have this massive pool of data, the data lakes, as it were, then is where you apply deep learning, machine learning, these kinds of techniques. And the use of AI has grown now tremendously. So a lot of these are available on clouds by default. So you can use that. Once the data is available, then you apply these machine learning techniques, and then they let you essentially learn the patterns. I mean, we have read stories about how in chess, games like chess, etc., where the computer basically has now become very smart. And how it's become smart is by learning from the whole repository of games that exist in the world. Now, I'll apply this same idea into the world of marketing first, and then give you a little wider view. One of the things that my company does is actually, when it sends out emails, it sends out a lot of emails. We are the largest in India for emails, is send time optimization. So what we do is, we see when you are most likely to open your emails. And that is therefore so it learns from every individual. What are your habits? And so it's looking at your past data, and it's therefore predicting that every day you're opening your mails between, say, 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, and at an individual level. So it changes for every person. And therefore, if an email from a brand lands into your inbox at that time, there's a higher likelihood of it being read. Subject lines can then be optimized based on, again, previous behavior, That is, they're again looking at patterns in the past to predict the future. Are you a person who will respond to a subject line which comes 50% off or 1+1 free? So these are simple things. Of course, AI has a lot more complex uses also. So for example, we've probably read the story about how GE uses AI in its engines, in its airline engines, in its locomotives, to decide to help predict failure and therefore take corrective action before that. So the use of AI is across industries. It is across across verticals, yeah, or across segments, even in a business. Now, in the world of marketing, here's a simple idea that you can use. We tend to look at all our customers who are there, and it applies across B2B businesses and B2C businesses. We look at our customers and then we say that, okay, we want to take care of every customer. That is not the right idea. The right idea is that there are some customers, probably 20% of your customers, who are much more valuable than everyone else. I mean, we've done a lot of analysis on B2C companies, especially in e-commerce, etc. And the best customers can be 5 to 10 times more valuable than the median customer. I'm not even talking of the bottom. There's a very good book by Sunil Gupta, Driving Digital Strategy, which came out last year, where he spoke about the fact that 20% of customers can account for 200% of profits. So this is what he calls the 200-20 rule. We know the 80-20 rule, 20% customers, maybe 80% of revenue. But when he says, when you take profitability, they make a huge impact. So think of these as your best customers. Now, what is it that you can do for best customers? And it's a word sort of I came up with called velvet rope marketing. Essentially, when we walk into when we check in at airline counters, and if you're traveling first class, business class, you see this red carpet, you see this velvet rope which separates the first class or business class passengers from everyone else. You go to a Disneyland, you see it at the Oscar ceremony also, those the side things. So the velvet rope really is what you can, the velvet rope experience is what you need to be able to provide to businesses. And if you can do that to customers, basically, so your best customers, reserve it for the best, create envy, create exclusivity, give these customers great access. And my belief is that by doing this, you will definitely see higher growth and more profits in the year to come. And basically creates a flywheel. So once you identify attributes of what your best customers do, you can acquire more customers like them. You can optimize your marketing spend. And in every one of these, the decisions are being made by machine learning, by an AI engine, which is looking at past patterns. So you can look at past 3-4 years of customer data. It will say, okay, these customers have the highest customer lifetime value. Therefore, these are the customers basically you should be focusing on. Like I said, doesn't matter B2B or B2C, the same basic ideas apply. And if you can do that, that is today, I think in today's environment where marketing budgets are going to shrink, capital is going to be constrained, profits are going to come under pressure. I think it's very important to look at ideas like velvet rope marketing. There's a very good book by a Wharton professor also, Peter Fader. There are 2 books on customer centricity. He makes the same point that what you have to look at is that the right customers, the best customers, and they will make all the difference. And you use AI in marketing to be able to identify which are the customers you should target and who are the customers with the best customer lifetime for whom you give this kind of a velvet rope experience out there, a differentiated experience for your best customers. And why are these best customers? Because they're going to stay with you longer, they're going to spend more, and in today's world, very important, they're going to spread the message wider. Every one of us has the ability to spread good experiences to a larger number of people. That's why in times like these, in tough times like these, make sure that you identify your best customers and you make sure you do everything that's possible to retain them and to cross-sell and upsell them as you go forward. And that is where AI becomes your business partner in making the velvet rope marketing program a success. Moving on, I think there are 2 key ideas that if you take back from this webinar, which you can basically work on implementing on Monday morning with your teams. I think the first idea is essentially what I call AI inside. The second idea is acquisitions outside. So inside the company, how can you use the power of technology? Okay, so whether it's processes to be automated. Today, AI plays a role in scanning through resumes which are there and identifying who is the best talent who could match the profiles that you are looking for. Analytics, okay, is another place, and analytics applies across departments. Now, once there is data, and that is the starting point. I think this is, I cannot overemphasize this. You should be looking at start with your customer touch points. Every place the customer is interacting with you, are you collecting data? Every place your resellers are interacting with customers, are you collecting that data back which comes into you? For your business partners, because without data, machines cannot learn. And you need this in a constant feedback loop. So every day, your business becomes smarter, becomes better. And that's only possible through AI. Now, so using AI across the organization, I think creates for a very, very powerful foundation for your business. Now, whether it is drug discovery, I mean, a lot of what we are seeing right now in the pharma industry, I mean, probably if this had happened maybe 10 or 20 years ago, okay, the process of drug discovery, of anticipating what side effects could be there for the drug, okay, would have probably taken 5 years, 10 years for that process to happen. But look at the speed of innovation right now, because they have a lot of data from the past. There's machines which are learning, which are telling them what interactions are likely to happen, which are predicting what kind of molecules to look at in that process. So I think it is very, very powerful. You have to look at how this can be used within your company, and it's different for every business. So I think to your CIO, CTO, I think the message should be, what is the data we are today gathering today on which we can start applying machine learning techniques? What is the data that we should be gathering? And therefore, how do you start the process of collecting that data and then building it out, building out the AI engine from there? So I think, and there are a lot of techniques, by the way. There's machine learning, deep learning, supervised learning. There are a lot of different ideas, technologies which are there. I don't think as a leader you need to worry too much about the technologies which are there. Okay, these are now technologies which are available from a large number of organizations. But the decision to essentially have data collected at every touch point, I think has to be your decision, and it has to get implemented within the business. So whether it's across the supply chain, whether it's employee interactions, whether it is customer interactions, partner interactions, I think that's the key message to take away.
Thank you.
The second point, I have one more point. The second point is around acquisitions. I think this is a huge inflection point globally. It's probably going to be much bigger in its impact than what 2008 was. It's probably once in 25, 30, 40 years that you see something like this event happen. Again, if you think back to 2008, a lot of companies who essentially made the bets did incredibly well in the following years. So look out for stressed assets. Okay, cash is very critical. So if you have the cash available, if you can generate the cash through inexpensive loans that could possibly be available, raising funds if for ventures who have got opportunities outside India, if there is a way to do that. I think this is a point to rethink how business is going to get done going forward. There are some changes are going to be temporary, but there are going to be some lasting shifts which are going to be happening. For example, the shift to digital, the shift to online. This is it's going to get accelerated, as the title of this webinar says. There's an acceleration in many trends, so what otherwise would have probably taken maybe 10 years to happen, we're going to see compressed in a few months. I mean, who would have thought online education? Okay, 2 months ago, we would have thought impossible. Today, you have pretty much every kid in the world, every college-going young person in the world studying online, all learning to work. with colleagues and getting trained online. We are doing a lot of webinars internally, learning sessions, which we always thought were very difficult to get people to attend in our company. We're doing it on a regular basis, recording those sessions. So when new people join, they have a huge repository of learning that is already available. So you will find a lot of such opportunities which will come. So inside the company, you look at AI. Outside, look for acquisitions, look out for stressed assets, because their industries are going to be reshaped. So you need to have some view on how tomorrow's world is going to be. There's an acceleration towards that world which is happening. And therefore, look at stressed assets which are there, because not every company would be smart with its cash flow, with its cash management. So you're going to see a lot of companies essentially die, go bankrupt. And that will be a very good time to pick up assets on the cheap and fundamentally reshape the way you do business. So that's the key sort of ideas. So Monday morning, if you go back as a leader, AI, and start thinking acquisitions. To your CFO, acquisitions. To your CIO and CTO, data and AI. Mahua, back to you.
I say the questions will be in the minds of many, which I'm echoing to you, that where the funds will come from, because acquisitions means you already are sitting on a surplus fund. Okay, so as we see, RBI is already cutting on the interest rate. When whether there will be a more of liquidity flow and encouragement from the RBI to take credit and take loans for such acquisitions as well. So do we see that coming anywhere?
I think it is inevitable. See, the hit that customers have suffered, or other businesses have suffered, both sides. Customers have suffered because many of them are seeing incomes disappear. We are not able to also go out and spend, and businesses. Government will have to work on restarting the economy. Okay, there is no other way to essentially push this train forward. So they will have to make cash available. They will have to make liquidity available on very good terms for businesses. So that's point number one. So you will have availability, and this is of course for good companies. That's number one. Second is that a lot of companies, of course, if they've operated with a profitability mindset, and these are public companies plus private companies. There's a word I like to use. We see unicorns. There's also this word called proficons, which I sort of came up with. So profitable companies which are there, private perhaps, promoter funded. This is a time when if you have personal capital, I think it's a great time to deploy it in the business. So you can be ready for acquisitions, not just in India, but globally. So cash is king, as they say. Events like this separate out players dramatically. The weeding out happens. But if companies are there, you have the cash. Of course, you have to take care of your current needs. But there are surpluses which are there. I think this is a great time to look for acquisitions out there. Okay. And I think that the corollary to that, of course, would be that how do you build profitable businesses? I think it's a lesson startups are also going to learn. In India, we have had this whole cash burn culture for a fair amount of time. While businesses need investment, just burning cash is not the solution.
So we have got very interesting questions, and this is something which was in my mind also when I approached you. Now that the production facilities of US and Japan shutting down in China, or I would say not shutting down, but people having a conservative view of putting all their apples in one basket, do you see opportunity for India and accelerating Make in India initiative? This is one of the questions.
Oh, absolutely. Very good question. I think this is a moment when we have to strategize both in government and in industry. How can we move 100 million jobs from China to India? 100 million Chinese, can we replace them with 100 million Indians? This should be the prerogative, I think, in the next 2 to 3 years. It has to be the foundation for the reforms that India needs on land, labor, capital, whatever it takes for global businesses to come into India. See, many of the businesses who are operating in China, the cost structures will not work by just shifting it back to US or Germany. They may do some part of that to ensure that they don't go through a supply chain challenge again, but they will need lower costs. In fact, I would say that even Chinese companies would want to lower production or their cost of production. Now, India has this opportunity. I think the trade war opened up a small window. I think we missed that last year. This one opens it up for two reasons. I think companies will have stress on their margins like we spoke about. And second is, I think there will be some sort of negative sentiment towards China going forward. It will be ratcheted up in the US campaign. I mean, Trump is already calling it the China virus. I think we've got to make it India's opportunity out here. So it needs an acceleration for Make in India, but it also needs support from the government that every impediment that is there in the factors of production, land, labor, and capital, they have to be done away with. We have to think of creating companies of size and scale. Okay, the India model for a long time, and Professor Panagaria has written about it in his new book, which has come. We have a mindset of small. Small is beautiful. Companies are small and all of that. We tend to favor the small. This is the time when the big have to be encouraged to grow bigger. The medium-sized have to be encouraged to grow bigger. That's the policies which we need across from the government to encourage industry. And if we can do that, I think we will look back. We will have short-term pain and challenges. There's no doubt about it on the medical side, on the economic side. But this can become India's turning point. What happened to China in the 80s?
There is another question coming from one of our clients from agricultural implement sector. How can AI help agricultural sector in India at cost-effective ways? Worldwide, AI is used to monitor crop and soil health. So he would like to know how to achieve that through AI in India.
Well, I'm not an expert in there. I can tell you a small story. I was at a farmers convention about a year and a half ago, and the Shetkari Sangatna, they had done it in Shirdi. And in fact, it's a very interesting group which argues for freedom for farmers. They're not asking for write-offs or loan waivers or anything. Just give farmers freedom. One of the presentations done by one of the senior people from the Shetkari Sangatna was about a video, and I think it was the person had gone to meet a farmer in the US, and there was a massive farm, acres and hundreds of acres of farmland. And on camera, this person asked, "So how many people do you have managing it?" Oh, he said, "We have 2.5. I'm there, my wife is there, and we have a person who comes in periodically." Everything else was AI, automation, and analytics completely. And it was an amazing video where what you just said, every square inch of the soil is monitored. There is machines basically making decisions. There are machines being operated remotely. And that's the transformation. The challenge in India is that we have rules which limit aggregation of land. Now, for making this happen, you need large farms. You cannot do AI on small farms because the cost will just not make it happen. So I think there is no doubt about the use of AI. I think if you look at it, AI is not sort of rocket science from that perspective. Yes. I think if you simplify it, basically it's three things. First is data collection. Now, from an agri standpoint of view, you're collecting data basically right from weather to soil conditions, to crop growth rates, all of these things. Second is you apply techniques to essentially learn about the past. For that, you need a lot of data, machine learning, deep learning, all of these neural networks. This whole world is there which will learn about the past. And the third aspect is making predictions about the future. So what do you need to do whether you're as a farmer or as a pharmacist, whatever, what do you need to do going forward, or as a marketer? So I can't give the specifics, but I'm sure if you search for AI in agriculture, you'll find a lot of papers, etc., a lot of case studies, etc., which are there. But the key point is there is no industry which does not need AI, even in the legal profession today. In China, where you have judgments being basically passed by machines, they are reading the case papers, they are applying their knowledge of what has happened in the past because there is a lot of similarity which happens. I think if you start thinking like this, it's a whole new world which opens up.
So there is another question that how does AI distinguish between a good data and the bad data? Bad data means which is not a relevant data. That's an irrelevant data. How AI distinguish that?
Very good question. So essentially one way to look at it is signal. What is the signal and what is the noise that's there? And this requires a lot of training. It will require some, of course, human help to identify, because we are very good at doing this thing. We can identify what is the right data to look at and what is the wrong or what is the bad data to look at. So this is essentially, you can think of this as what is called supervised learning. So you're training the machine. So there's a training period that happens. When I said that the AI has to basically ingest the past data, there is some amount of help from humans. We are not becoming obsolete anytime soon.
Yeah.
There is help from humans which is required to help identify what is the data that is right, what is the data that should basically get amplified, what is the signal and what is the noise. I think once you do that, the machine is then very good at learning this. You see it in the medical profession. Okay, when you analyze, for example, X-rays that are there, a doctor is able to do that very well. But if you train the machine with enough that, look, this is not really a bad patch which is there, it's just a harmless blob that is there. You give enough of those, the machines learn. Okay, so you need a lot of data, you need human interventions, human guidance when it comes to training.
Yeah.
And then you will find that machines can do as good, if not a better job in many, many professions.
So there is one interesting question. They say that post-COVID, what are the sectors which you see will emerge, the new sectors? We have seen a time when Alibaba emerged. So they are saying, what are the sectors which will go down and what are the sectors which will emerge?
Okay. Yeah, it's never an easy answer looking ahead, because a lot of it is depending on how people will behave, of course, going forward. I was just on a call with a few friends where we had this debate just earlier in the afternoon. And the debate was that, will people go back to their earlier behavior, or will we still be afraid of shaking hands with strangers, of traveling on airplanes and so on? So I think we've got to separate out two effects. There will be short-term effects, which are everyone's going to feel. Okay, so we are going to be more careful about going to conferences, about going to public spaces like theaters, etc., and all of that, traveling. Until, for example, a 30-second bio test comes up, okay, which can tell whether you have the antibodies or not. I cannot see any country letting in passengers or letting them travelers from another country in the near term, and that will happen. There's a lot of innovation happening around these things. So separate out what will be short-term effects, which will basically wear away after some time, and there will be a longer-term effects which will stay. So those are what I call the secular trends which are there. Now, in the short-term effects, we of course see right now there is fear of flying, fear of staying in hotels, using maybe Uber, Ola, Airbnb. Many of these businesses will face challenges. So a friend of mine put it very well. He said there could be, where there's this whole shared economy that is there, would that move back to individual ownership economy? Now, that's a big question, and I think you will see some of that happen. Will we feel safe? When will we feel safe to travel in an Ola again, or in an Uber again? Because we don't know who was there earlier in the car. Okay, we don't know what may have been left behind. Okay, so these are significant questions which are still open. I think a lot of it depends on human behavior, the time frame that the vaccine is available, whether the virus mutates or has reoccurs and so on. But there are a few industries, I think, which will benefit disproportionately. In the US, in fact, if you see, I've not analyzed all the companies, but there are 4 companies whose prices have gone up dramatically, at least 4. Netflix, Amazon, Zoom, which we are using right now, and Shopify. Common to all of these, digital. The use of the cloud, the use of the internet for delivering their services. So any business which involves a physical delivery of service will, I think, face challenges. And all of these were trends. Netflix, I mean, some of us had started, but now look at the growth which has happened for streaming. Look at what's happened with video conferencing. I mean, the first week, we were all very uncomfortable trying to figure out how we will do our meetings, how we'll get people productive from home. 3 weeks later, we're pretty comfortable. Who would have imagined a webinar like this arranged in 3 days' time on a Saturday evening at 6 o'clock? Okay, you would not have imagined this probably a month ago. So this is where you see the new opportunities that are coming up. I think anything which involves digital interactions, I think is going to rise. So the use of the internet, and these are secular trends. These will stay even beyond the vaccine, etc. Once people learn new ways of doing things, they are not going to go back to some of the older ways. I think work from home is probably overrated in India. At least our experience has been it's not well. Productivity is a big challenge in India because many of the employees do not have separate work areas. Bandwidth is not that connectivity bandwidth is not that great. There are a lot of disturbances which are there. And again, just between us, I think not many of us want to be mopping the floor and cleaning the utensils on a regular basis in the work from home period that is there. So I think a lot of us would. Yeah, my wife is not around right now.
That's fine. That's not a wife's job only. Okay, this is not a forum to take up that.
I know that, but I'm telling the reality. I never helped in cleaning the house. I'm telling my own case. I never made my own bed. And these I'm doing now, which I probably would not have, which I last did 30 years ago when I was in the US. And I think it's a good thing. I think there are good habits also being learned, which I think should stay on even beyond the virus. But I think more importantly, businesses which are digital, I think, or businesses, and every business is really a digital business of sorts. Okay. I remember this conversation with a friend of mine at Amul almost 20 plus years ago. He said, I said, so look, you're in the foods business. He said, no, we are a digital company in the foods business. Okay, and that's the foresight that they had. That how do you use technology as a core to everything that they are doing? And that's where I think the opportunity is. So embrace of technology, I think, becomes very critical. So industries, hotels, etc., we all know that are going to have challenges. Travel, tourism, services sectors, I think, are going to have challenges. The manufacturing sector, I think, if India can do something better on its laws and give a boost to Make in India, I think we have an incredibly good opportunity to make in India for the world, as has been the dream for a very long time. Digital businesses, streaming, online education, etc., will do well. There was a question about whether education itself, will Indian students want to go and pay $80,000 a year, $60,000 a year for US education? But then, the best US universities are not in the pure business of just teaching alone. They're in the brand business. It's the tag that they give you. And I don't see that going away. Harvard is Harvard. Harvard is not going to give you the same, an education done remotely does not have the same cachet. So I think you will see some changes. I think one thing which will accelerate is learning new things. I think once people realize the power of digital, the ability to learn new things, and we have time, extra time on our hands. People are not commuting 2-3 hours a day. You're almost adding 2 days in a week. How can we learn new things faster? You see the power of the internet, etc., which is there. So multiple industries which I think can survive through this period, okay, and come out stronger with the use of cash, a focus on profitability, and adding on AI, adding on a digital component to their business, and this applies across industries, I think will do well. The most impacted, I think, are going to be the industries where you have that physical touch, which may take some time to come back till at least the vaccine and antibodies testing starts happening.
There is an interesting question from our own Chief Operating Officer. Okay, she is also a technocrat. She said some believe AI is the brain and robot in the body. Do we need to integrate them for better synergy and efficiency, or they would be different, or that would be a different aspect?
Okay, so I think there are two parts which are being combined. So one is the sort of brain, and if I understood the question correctly, it is the mechanical aspect of the delivery that is there. So I think the way to look at AI really is the physical form can be pretty much anything. I think what you have today, and we've seen it in movies like Star Wars or whatever. I mean, you have those R2D2, etc., which are there. I mean, they seem to have a brain of their own in making decisions, etc. But I think we are still quite some time away from there. I think what we are in is the fact that what AI is really doing is in using past data to help us make better decisions about the future. It's, I think, as simple as that. It's not very threatening. What did the internet do? It basically helped people and machines connect with each other. At a simple level, the first order effect is exactly that. Then you see the second order, third order effects of that which happen. You have social networks, you have e-commerce which starts taking place, but the first barrier which is basically broken is the fact that distance matters a lot less. When I started India's first Indian portals in '95, the thinking that time was that NRIs sitting anywhere in the world could get access to Indian news and information without having to wait for a copy of the Times of India 7 to 10 days later. So if you go back to what AI is basically, it's really the brain, the software piece, the intelligence piece, the predictions piece. Now, it can get multiple forms. So in factories, you can have robots which are learning constantly. But at the end of the day, it's the software which is basically powering them. Now, the software can be of two types. It can be static software. So it's coded once and it's put in there. And to a large extent, that was how the world worked on factory floors, etc. But now with the availability of data, AI gives you a feedback loop. So it can learn. It can become better every day. And I think that is really where the power starts coming in. I'm not sure if I answered the question entirely, but I'm just trying to separate out the physical form and the digital form.
There is a question from a startup that how can startup manage cash flow? I know you have started many business, sold it off, bundled it and sold it off at very interesting rate. And so that's how somebody is asking how to manage the cash flow in a startup.
Okay, so I think one of the very important aspects to think about when one is doing a startup is really the business model that is going to be there. When I started India World way back in '95, I was coming off after 2.5 years of failure. I tried multiple ideas, they have not worked. And there was one thing which my father emphasized to me. He said, do not take other people's money and do not lose money. It's never easy to do both of those things because you need some startup capital, of course. But whatever is there, can you create a business model which takes you to profitability faster? Okay, many times in startups, the mindset tends to become that I've got to keep burning money because it's a treadmill. Others are growing much faster than me. And therefore, if I don't spend money acquiring new customers constantly, others are going to get ahead. There's an alternative way to think about it. And I again go back to a story from 25 years ago. When I started India World, and this was very early on in March 95, we said we didn't know the model which would be there. I tried subscriptions. We tried charging people globally, Indians globally, for the content that we are offering. I gave up fairly soon because I got one subscription from all of GE. What I realized later is they had taken the login. One person had signed up for $20 and then sent out the email password to their internal mailing list. Indians will always be Indians. So we had to work on new models. We started building websites for other companies. And that helped generate the cash flow till the world of advertising started taking off. For us, for advertising to take off, multiple things had to come in place. We need to build up a large audience. We needed users to come in also from India. We needed a critical mass of NRIs. And so I think if we start thinking deeply that at its core, what is my business about? What is the business model? Then I think we'll come up with very creative ways by which any business can be turned to cash flow positive in a shorter time frame than we would do if we worked under the assumption that there is an infinite amount of capital always available for a business. So I think if we put constraints on us, okay, that I'm going to make this business profitable, I think it can be done. So from a startup's perspective, I think hard. Take this time to think hard about the business model. You do not want to be in a Me Too industry. There has to be something which separates you out. Your business model cannot be that you are going to be the last man, last company standing, okay, with infinite amounts of capital available. If that is what you're thinking, then it's the wrong business. How is it that you build an edge? Okay, I think that's the key, and that requires much greater thought on what are the needs of the customers that you're serving and what's the business model that you have.
Sorry. There is a question that how AI can help in the education field. I know there are a lot of app learning is nowadays there, and I think they can customize based on the data of the queries of age wise and all. But yes, you can take it up.
I think there was a very good book by a Harvard Business School professor. He passed away recently, Clay Christensen, The Innovator's Dilemma and multiple other things. Many years ago, the idea was, I think it was called Disrupting Class. And the core idea that Christensen talked about was of personalized education. And I think that is where AI again plays the role. The same idea which is being used for giving Netflix recommendations, etc., because we are all different. Our likes are different. The pace at which we study and learn is different. So what AI can really help is in creating custom lesson plans, seeing which areas, because there's instant feedback. Because for teachers, it's in a class of 25 or 50 students, it becomes somewhat hard to identify pluses and minuses of each student, and each person may pick up some concepts at different with different levels of ease. What AI can again do is help create customized plans. Through the testing, one can figure out which areas an individual is not good at or a class is not good at, in which case the feedback needs to go back to the teacher saying that maybe these are concepts which the student has not learned. So again, it comes back to our fundamental idea that basically, can you collect data on what students are learning? Very simple. So that is where you have to do testing. Periodic tests help students learn. Even when if students are learning through video platforms, you can actually monitor if they're going back and forth on a concept. You can figure out that, look, maybe this is an area where they need to be tested a little bit more. So the videos could be then giving feedback to the testing systems, and the tests can then essentially help tailor the learning that is happening or the teaching that is happening to each student to create a customized learning plan, as well as identifying which areas the student is good at, which could then be amplified further. Or the student is picking up things faster, okay, maybe you want to get that person to advanced levels much faster.
There's one question which I would address, that is with regard to the privacy issues being raised for collection of data. Now, with regard to the privacy issues, as long as the data has been given to you voluntarily, and you are utilizing the data for making yourself more efficient, there is no data breach. As long as you are not handing over that data to a third party, then there is no data breach. Privacy bill is pending in the parliament, and most probably we are expecting maybe monsoon session it will be taken up. So that is with regard to that. And there is one more question. Do you see that the telecom sector...
I'll just add one comment to what you just said. I think it's two words which are important.
Right.
It's consent and control.
Yes.
So the user's consent needs to be there, and there have to be controls on the companies collecting the data.
Okay. Do you see the telecom sector zooming up after post-COVID-19?
Okay. I think the telecom sector in India, of course, has faced a lot of challenges. Some decisions by the companies and, of course, some decisions made by the government, both have contributed to the stress which the telecom sector has faced. And, of course, the courts. How can we forget the courts role in? in this. I think the key point in the telecom sector is the following, that if you actually go with the trends which are there on data and on the secular shift towards digital, I think we are going to see a dramatic increase in bandwidth consumption. So the usage is going to go up. All of us are probably consuming 10 times the bandwidth that we were. Of course, business usage has fallen, but I'm assuming that will come back at some point of time going forward. I think the challenge for the telecom sector in India is going to be that the biggest overhang really for the telecom sector is the debt that is there, especially on both Airtel and on Vodafone Idea. Like I said, these are partly those problems are not because of their own making, but I think what telecom companies now need to start thinking is that they basically have the pipe, okay, and the pipe effectively is a commodity. As long as there are more than three players in the marketplace, there could be a fight for acquisition. We saw the price wars 2 years ago that were there. Probably unlikely to come back now, the price wars, because everyone's saddled with a lot of debt which they need to worry about. But I think what telecom companies need to also see is, are there services that they can build above the pipe, beyond the pipe, where they have a lot of information about the user. Verizon, for example, in the US, one of the largest telecom companies, has basically built a very powerful ad network based on the data that they have. They have bought media properties. So I think telecom companies will also need to innovate. If they're just going to stay a pipe, I think there are limited upside for growth. But I think if they can use the breath of air that the rise in consumption has given the companies, then I think they have also need to start thinking of them as a different type of company going forward, not just as a pipe company.
Okay, so there is one question from an entrepreneur, that the investment which were planned previous to COVID set in, like investment in the factory, machinery, JV, or foreign investment, should that be continued, or it should be put on a slow motion right now to rethink about it?
Okay, I think it's a decision every entrepreneur will have to make individually. I'll give you my own example. We thought about this question also, and I think the answer is at two levels. This year, like I said earlier, what is going to be the impact on your business if you have 9 months of revenue and 12 months of expenses? Okay, because you will need cash to fill in the gap. Okay, you have to work on some amount of cost reductions, whether it is optimization of staff, etc. All of those will have to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. But at the second level, I think what you need to look at are opportunities in your industry. Okay, this is something which none of us had planned for when we made our FY21 business plans in January or February. No one expected anything like this to come and hit. Very few of us expected that revenues would be down 25%, in some businesses down 0. Okay, no one factors in such a large reduction for an unknown period of time. So as an entrepreneur, I think the decision you have to make is, if you can survive this period, these next 6 to 12 months, I think you will come out much stronger. So that's why the question has to be taken at two levels. There is some funds you will need for your immediate survival. So some of the plans that you had planned on, you will need to worry about how you're going to meet cash flows, because some of your customers are not going to be able to pay you on time. They're going to delay payments. You may not be able to delay payments for your employees because they will need the money. Employees are a large chunk. You will probably, maybe the electricity companies will give you a 3-month moratorium, may not extend it further. The rents will have to be paid. Some of your costs will have to be paid. So you need to factor that in when with the delays of the cash coming in. Now, after that, if the surpluses are there, okay, then I think you need to look aggressively at expansion. Because if you're in the right type of business, okay, if you're in a business which has some digital component, which has probably a manufacturing opportunity to serve global companies out of India, I think you will be in a position to come back very strongly and use this as an inflection point. I mean, I gave a talk in my company about a couple of weeks ago, just when this crisis started. I said, look, we have survived for 23 years because we have taken every crisis and converted it into an opportunity. So I think once we are past the shock, and it's been a shock, okay, because none of us expected this. Last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, if we keep that aside, now that we have settled into, we know a little bit more about the future. We know it's going to take some time. It's not something which is going to go away right away. Okay, now we can start thinking ahead. Look at the first order effects which are going to be there on your business, the cash flows. Look at the second order opportunities that come up, okay, for expansion. Because many companies are going to die. I was talking to a VC friend of mine and he said, Rajesh, 25 to 30% companies, especially startups, are not going to make it beyond the next many months. Now, if you are not one of those who is going to die, okay, then I think you have a significant opportunity. At the end of the day, customer demand is going to be there. India is a young country. India is a growing country. The mortality rates in India are going to be significantly lower because the over 65 age population is a third of, say, Italy or US, etc. And there may be multiple other factors I think will be also probably come into play. So I think the opportunities are going to be there in India. Those fundamentals don't change, but you need the cash for any of these opportunities. Keep that in mind.
Thank you. Thank you for taking out time and encouraging people to stay positive. And I know there was a time in 2014 when you were behind Modi during the elections, and how AI helped in bringing the figures and played a critical role in the election as well. And anybody would like to contact Mr. Jan, please put it up. We can be approached and we'll give his contact details. And we thank you for participating. Depending on your interest, we can take it further and go more technical and maybe addressing it to more technical participants. Thank you. Have a good evening and have a great weekend. Thank you, Mr. Jain.
Thank you, Mahua, for organizing this, and thank you everyone for staying on right till the end on a Saturday evening. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure, and thank you for the wonderful questions that you asked.
Thank you.
Thank you.